All the behind the scenes stuff.
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry to interrupt the flow.
Oh no, that's good. All right. Take two. Hey, welcome everybody to our first DirectConnect of October, which is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And we're going to be coming to you this month with some additional videos, a little bonus content as we dive into some of the topics related to cybersecurity that are more broadly applicable in your life. So normally we focus a lot about critical infrastructure, security, and compliance, but what we're going to talk about this month are things that really you need to be thinking about even in your personal lives. And we're going to kick it off with the topic of multi-factor authentication, usually acronymized as MFA. And so with that, I want to introduce Leonard Chamberlin, who's here with me. Leonard, good to see you.
Likewise, Steve. Good morning. Multi-factor authentication. That not a new concept there, but for those that don't know, I mean that's something that came along to replace just the old username and password with something a little more secure. The idea being that it couples multiple factors of authentication, coupling something you know with something you have or something you are. So something you know, like username or password, something you have, such as an authentication token. Used to be a little fob on a keychain that would cycle through numbers, but nowadays most everybody just downloads an app to their phone. In addition to apps, I mean, you occasionally get texted a password from your bank. But again, it goes to your personal device so that it is something that you have. And another option is something you are, biometrics, retinal eye scans, fingerprints. I don't think anyone's using dental at this point, but at any rate, something you are.
As you were talking through that, I just, for some reason, the concept of the knock knock joke came into my mind, and how would multi-factor authentication change our sense of humor? Knock knock.
Who's there?
Steve.
Steve who?
Steve Parker. I guess now you got to ask me to prove it, right?
Yeah.
And you'd probably ask me what the password is, and I'd give you the secret password, and then you ask me for that second factor to prove it somehow, way, shape, or form. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is, why is multi-factor authentication a thing? Why is it so important, and why are we hearing so much about it these days?
In this day and age of people accessing personal accounts, whether that be for financial gain, whether it be for corporate espionage, or whatever the case may be, there needs to be a higher level of security for ensuring that the person who is accessing the system, again, whether it's a bank, whether it's an industrial control system, whether it's simply email, those things need a higher level of security than has historically been there.
If I have a really strong password, let's say I'm a savant and I can memorize a 20-character password with random special characters and such, isn't that good enough? Why would I need to have an additional authentication if I have a great password?
I'm hung up on why you're a savant for some reason.
It was a hypothetical. I wasn't making that assertion.
Well, regardless of the length of the password, I mean, those are things that isn't something that necessarily can be guessed or memorized, but it's something that can be brute forced by a computer. It's not as simple as it used to be, right? Certainly, there are other mechanisms to combat that. Limiting the number of log-on attempts, password failures. Historically, those have been an easy way to maybe limit that exposure. But there are potential impacts, right? How many times have you locked yourself out accidentally from your own bank account, from your email, for whatever the case may be, and then you have to wait for someone to reset the password for you to regain access. Multi-factor authentication, on the other hand, presents an opportunity to have that higher level of security, but still allowing that flexibility. Not to say that you shouldn't still limit the number of login attempts.
You want to ask me a question, Leonard? I've been putting you on the spot since the beginning here.
In your experience, have you seen any instances where multi-factor authentication has had a negative impact and has not had a benefit to the users that it was intended to have?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think of examples. I'm not sure that I can point to one specifically. It's certainly, from a theoretical perspective, it's another obstacle that you need to get through. Anytime you make things harder for the attackers, you often will make them harder for the people you really want into a system. I guess one personal example, I have a lot of two-factor accounts where my phone is the device, and using a Microsoft Authenticator or a Google Authenticator or Duo or some of the other ones. And last time I purchased a new phone, in fact, I got a new phone just last summer, I had to go in and re-register, re-enroll for all of those accounts. Fortunately, it wasn't a large number of accounts, but typically, because of the security involved, the authentication information will not transfer from your old phone to your new phone. You have to go to each account individually, log in, re-register, or re-enroll that new device. And so that does add a measure of inconvenience. And we can certainly debate whether it's worth it or not. Certainly for the high value accounts, I think it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, that's true. I personally have dealt with that as well. You upgrade your phone, or you lose your phone, or your phone is stolen, and you have to get a new one, and then all of a sudden, everything that keyed off of that as the thing you have, all that has to be reset, which is sometimes challenging because on occasion you need that thing you have, which you no longer have, in order to update it. So yeah, it has been a little bit less than user-friendly approach in those situations.
Well, but, especially in the case of a lost device, for example, in my case, I had my old phone while I transitioned to my new phone. But if you lost your device, or if it was damaged or rendered useless, that would be a significant inconvenience, because to your point, you wouldn't have the two-factor to log into the account. You'd have to use an alternative measure, or maybe call a customer service or a help desk in order to get that taken care of.
Yep, exactly. I think we've been talking about cases where, for the most part, it's electronic access, access to some type of system via bank or VPNing into your company's network. But I think it's also worth pointing out, it's also used extensively in critical infrastructure for securing physical access as well. Most places, you have a badge and you scan it at a badge reader and you're let in a secure area that you have access to. But, if you leave your badge in your car and someone steals it, or whatever the case may be, leave it at your desk, someone walks away with it. None of those are good ideas, incidentally, as far as badge management. But there needs to be a multi-factor authentication implemented at the physical security access point as well. And again, those typically go with something you have, your badge, coupled with something maybe a PIN code that you punch in on a pad next to the badge reader. But biometrics are used in some cases as well, with the retinal scan or the fingerprint scan in those situations. Just depends on the location, I guess, and the criticality, as well as their budget that they had when they were rolling out their security.
Mm-hmm. I think, multi-factor authentication, and really in many cases it's dual factor or two-factor authentication, because it's only two, not three or more. And it adds a great layer of security, and it's fairly strong in most cases, but it's not perfect. It can certainly fail. I have a few ideas in mind of examples, but I figure I'll let you go first if you can think of some of the ways where multi-factor can be defeated or worked around. that people should be aware of?
Well, given it's October, Halloween comes to mind, so cutting off people's fingers or eyes and using those like they do in the movies. But something less gruesome than that. I mean, obviously, we already talked about stealing of the badge. Depending on the pin, I mean, someone shoulder surfing and seeing what you use, so then they become someone, that factor that they know has now been passed on. A mitigating factor of that would be obviously a constant periodic requirement to change that PIN number so it's not always the same. I guess kind of the insider angle, someone having access to the database that stores all of that, compromising some of this information in that regard, whether it be, learning what the shared secret is or private secret, if that's the case. Or alternatively, being able to generate a new badge with someone else's credentials. So yeah, certainly you've got to watch the watchers.
Mm-hmm. I can think of a couple examples that I can add on to that. One, I think we were from an awareness perspective. When you get a code, many banks, for example, will send a text to your phone and they'll say, "We will never call and ask you for this code." Something that's emerged recently that I've seen from a number of sources is if you post something, say, for sale on an online marketplace, you got contacted from someone who ostensibly wants to purchase what you have for sale. And then they'll say, "But so I know you're a real person, can I send you a code?" And you tell me the code and just so I know you're real. And of course, they'll send a code to your phone. And in the meantime, they're entering your phone number onto some website somewhere, and then trying to authenticate that phone number. And so they're trying to get you to give them the code that was sent to your phone. So, never, ever do that. Never give your code out to anybody unsolicited in that nature. And I think my all-time favorite, you mentioned the insider threat, Leonard. An organization I was working for a while back had a vendor that they had given access to, and it was an individual on a support team who was supposed to have access. And this individual was given a username, password, and also a hard token, a secure ID token for two-factor authentication. And they wanted to share their access. And you might think that's a difficult thing to do in that scenario, but they shared the username and they shared the password. And then they took their token and they put it under a webcam and shared the URL for the webcam. So anybody could get access to that code. And they were able to share their access that way. That was one of the more inventive, creative ways to bypass the two-factor authentication that I had seen used. So be aware of that from an insider perspective. I think we've talked about and mentioned kind of offhand some of the common forms of multi-factor authentication that are out there. Just kind of running those down. And, if you can think of others, Leonard, that I might have missed, feel free to jump in. But typically, the phone apps are becoming very, very common. Google Authenticator is one. And how those work essentially is there's a cryptographic algorithm, very fancy mathematical algorithm, and there'll be a shared secret, one stored on your phone, and then another one stored at the account provider. And that secret is used to generate that rotating 6-digit code, and it's based on the time. So every 60 seconds, it'll typically rotate. Microsoft uses that as well. The Microsoft Authenticator also has the concept of a push notification. So it's an app running on your phone, and when you go to log in, the account provider can send a notification to your phone, and then you can approve or deny that request. So that's another fairly common one. Various other token type apps, typically with that 6-digit number. One of the other ones we've seen, of course, is the text message. You'll get a code via SMS. That one's actually been discouraged by Department of Homeland Security. They said that's not really a strong one to rely on. What are your thoughts on that?
At the end of the day, the message is still going to a device that you have. So the degree to which that is potentially more problematic than having an application on your phone generating that code. Perhaps just concerned that it could be intercepted en route. I think that's such a small possibility of that occurring, and having time to actually use the code before the person that requested it used it. Those typically have a very quick timeout as well, relatively speaking. They're not good for 24 hours. They're usually good for 5 minutes, maybe an hour at the most. So yeah, it would have to be a very coordinated endeavor there to leverage that, in my opinion.
And I guess certainly it's better than nothing to some degree. So if the only option you have is to use a text message, certainly better than not having that. I think we've touched on a lot of aspects of multi-factor authentication, why it's important, some of the ways that it's performed, and some of the risks and things to think about. Any final thoughts, Leonard, before we wrap this up?
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to chat about multi-factor authentication today. I mean, as you said, and as we've discussed, there are some risks in that regard, but I think more and more companies are recognizing the need for this additional layer of security as they start encouraging you to set up multi-factor authentication. It's not just for work. You could also benefit from it in your personal life as well. So I would highly encourage everyone to take advantage of whatever services offer multi-factor authentication as an option.
All right, thank you. And I think I'll definitely second that and say, particularly your high value accounts, financial accounts, other personal accounts that you, even social media, you don't want people hijacking your social media. So where possible and where feasible, I can encourage you all to take a good hard look at what is available and enable that where it makes sense to do so. With that, I want to thank you for joining us for another Direct Connect with Archer, and come back next week for another of our October series of topics related to cybersecurity and awareness. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you would like to learn more about the Archer team and how we can protect you, visit our website and reach out with a phone call or an email. If you know of a topic or someone you think we should talk to on Direct Connect, please let us know in the comments below.